Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. Emily lives in her small and quaint town, where every corner and face should be a comforting sight. But tonight, the air is thick with an unsettling tension. When she steps out of her house, a pit forms in her gut. The familiar streets have turned into a twisted nightmare. The street lamps flicker continuously, casting terrifying shadows that seem to be reaching out to her. The old bookstore that she frequently visited, once a sanctuary of knowledge, is a dark feeling, with its windows shattered, creating eyes of a long-dead beast. The comforting hum is replaced by tyrannical silence, broken only by the distant cries that send shivers through her own soul. Emily's heart pounds in her chest as she ventures deeper through the eerie town. The park, once filled with joyful laughter of children, is now a wasteland, hidden by a thick fog. The playground swings move on their own, making the creaks have an eerie rhythm, as if they are being pushed with unseen hands. She feels eyes boring into her from the darkened forest, as if waiting on the right time to attack. Panic sets in as Emily finally realizes that the familiar town is now a twisted village of horror. She must navigate in this nightmarish version, each step filled with horror and dread. The clock tower, a now monstrous figure, chimes erratically, marking the passage of time. With every heartbeat, the thin line between reality and nightmare blurs closer together. Emily knows she must uncover this dark secret before it completely consumes her. She reaches the town square, which used to be the heart of community gatherings, is now a deserted wasteland. Emily's mind races with questions. What caused this transformation? Is she the only one left? She remembers the stories her grandmother told her about ancient curses, but dismissed them as common folklore. But now, the stories seem too real. Determined to break the dreadful curse, Emily runs to an old library. As she approaches, she notices that the grand entrance is blocked by debris. Unfazed, she finds a side window, destroyed but accessible. She carefully climbs through, her heart beating with anticipation. Inside, the library is a chilling sight to see. The once lively and bright building is now covered in dust, with books toppled all over the floor. Emily knows that if she needs answers, this is the right place to look for them. Emily makes her way through to the section of local history and folklore. The books are old and darkened with age. She pulls out a specifically ancient book, but it is barely legible. She begins flipping through pages, and she finds a reference to a dark ritual performed centuries ago. The ritual could explain the nightmare the town has become. The ritual, according to the book, is meant to protect the town from invaders, but it comes with an unfortunate price. If the ritual was disturbed, a curse would be unleashed upon the town. The curse would cause despair and destruction. Emily realizes that the ritual has been tampered with, causing the town to face the consequences. With her newfound determination, Emily decides to confront them. She leaves the library, her steps confident despite her eerie surroundings. In the distance, the mansion looks haunted and foreboding. As she gets nearer, the gates slowly creak open, as if inviting her in. The line between reality and nightmare blurs farther. She steps through the gate, the creaking sound echoing in the silence. Her heart races as she continues venturing. Although the path ahead is uncertain, Emily knows that she needs to push through and reclaim her town from this unfortunate curse. The stakes couldn't be any higher, and failure is not an option. She must summon all the courage and perseverance to save the town before it's too late. Emily's determination grows with each step she takes. The fog quickly thickens, which casts an eerie glow that twist and turn live lifelike creatures. She clutches her lantern tighter, its dim light helping pave the way through the oppressive darkness. The memories of joyful times fuel her determination even more. Suddenly, the ground slowly moves beneath her feet, and she stumbles across a hidden trapdoor. The wood is cold to the touch, and she shakily pries it open. Just then, a gust of stale air rushes out. She slowly descends into the unknown, her heart pounding in her ears. She knows that somewhere in the foreboding place holds the key of restoring the once beautiful town. As she descends through the creaky ladder, she hears faint voices echoing throughout the chamber. The walls are lined with ancient runes, glowing faintly in the dim light. With every step she takes, the air becomes more chilling, and an unsettling feeling rests in her gut. She reaches the bottom and finds a small cavern with paths in every direction. Her instincts guide her towards the faint sound of the water dripping. In the distance, she notices a dark figure standing over an altar. Heart pounding, she slowly approaches and grips her lantern tightly. The guardian raises its head, revealing eyes that are gleamy, full of light. As her mind races with questions, the guardian speaks in a voice that seemed to echo in the depths of the cavern. "Who dares to disturb this scared ground?" Summoning all of her courage, Emily responds, "I am Emily, and I want to break the curse that has bestowed on my town. Tell me what to do." The guardian's eyes narrow, as if questioning her. "To lift the curse, you must retrieve the ancient relic hidden within these walls. It is guarded by trials that will test your strength and wisdom. Only the most determined can succeed." Emily nods, perseverance increasing her confidence. She knows the path she is going to face will be dangerous, but the fate of her town rests on her shoulders. With a final glance, she steps forward into the darkness, ready to face a trial and reclaim the relic that holds the key to restoring the town. I stepped off the bus in the middle of town and got totally soaked by the rain. I tried to shelter myself with a magazine I was reading, but it didn't help much, so I rushed across the busy 5-line street to find an awning. The cars honked at me as I sprinted. "Yeah, I know you don't like me," I said to them. I doubt that they could hear me in this downpour, and I really didn't care if they did. I had a really hard day at the office today, as they say. The boss pulled a bunch of us into a conference and started the usual drone about making the numbers, and that we would be all out of job if we didn't make the numbers. I could feel all of the eyes of the room settling on me as if I had something to do with it. Somebody had to be blamed, I guess, and I was it. Again. I could never catch a break no matter how hard I tried. The rain really topped off my bad day like the cherry on a banana split. Perfect. I shook my head as I continued to shiver from the rain under the awning of a cafe. "Hey, why don't you come on in and get warm?" Avo said. I turned around and saw a blonde woman in her 30s or so, giving me a smile that could light up a room, and her voice had all the home-style charm of a freshly baked cookie. I followed her into her cafe. As soon as I walked through the door, I felt the rush of warm air and a smell of cinnamon. I saw 2 comfortable chairs and small table in front of a fireplace, so I made a beeline for the closest one and sat down. The chair felt so good, it almost felt like it hugged me. I looked around for a little bit, and then I looked back towards the counter where the barista was making a hot drink. I suddenly felt embarrassed that I had sat down on this chair while still being wet, and my face fell. "I'm so sorry. I got this chair all wet." Again, she smiled at me. "Don't you worry about it, hon. You're all cold and wet, and you need something warm in you. Here's a cuppa, my finest, for you, on the house." She placed the cup and saucer on the little side table. I saw the steam rising from the hot reddish liquid inside. As much as I tried to resist the urge to wait to take a sip, I felt strangely drawn to this drink, as the scent of apples filled my head. "You had a hard day, huh?" "Yeah," I said to her, then I looked up. "How can you tell?" She laughed. "I'm psychic." She laughed again. "Okay, I'm not psychic. You came in wet, and you were looking down at the ground most of the time. Just body language, that's all. Nothing special." I nodded my head and took a sip of the drink, and it reminded me of a mincemeat pie on Christmas night. I closed my eyes for a bit and just let gravity take me. "It's good, huh?" she said to me softly, almost in a barely perceptible whisper. "I made it just for you, hon." I managed to say, before the ambience finally lulled me into a much-needed sleep. "Perhaps a few minutes shut-eye here won't hurt," I said as I reached for the saucer and the cup. Clouds. I saw clouds. I was sitting in a dusty field overlooking the Grand Canyon. It was dusk, and the last rays were disappearing over the horizon. The air was crisp and dry. I sighed and yawned deeply as I took in the view. I remember thinking that I should take a little trip here one day. Beautiful, isn't it? "Yeah," I said, then frowned. Who was talking to me? I looked around, and I didn't see anyone. Wait. Shh. The female voice intoned softly, "It's totally okay." I continued to look around a bit but saw no one. "Who are you? Where are you? Sorry to bother you, but I have news, and you're not going to like it." I looked around again and shook my head. "You have news? I don't even know who you are." The voice sighed for a moment and spoke again more quietly. "Who I am isn't important. I am here to rescue you." "What? Let's take a good look at your situation and you'll see why you need me. For starters, you work in the sales department, and your department is not meeting the designated numbers, right?" I slowly nodded. "Well, most corporations by this time have discovered ways to sort of trim the ranks without causing too much fuss and attention, okay?" I said, wondering where this was going. "So, when the corporation decides to find a sacrificial lamb, they make contact with her and set up a meeting. This way, they avoid the termination papers, severance pay, etc." "Her? That barista in the cafe?" I shook my head at this. "Okay, so they send me to a barista, or they send her to me? Weird, but so what?" I shrugged my shoulders, or at least I thought I did. I suddenly felt a little cramped. "Did you notice her name? I think it was Lottie or something." "Starting to feel a little cramped? That means she has got you, and we don't have much time to get you out." "What? Get me out of what? Do you trust us? Do I have a choice?" "What we're about to do has never been tried before. We are going to try matter transference to get you out of there before your whole consciousness disappears, but we have to wait until she has completely wrapped you for storage." My eyes went wide. The voice continued its explanation. "The tea gave you has a strong sedative and a narcotic, giving you that euphoria you felt. Then she wraps you up for safekeeping for a while, to keep you fresh. Unfortunately, this process does cause the victim to suffocate." "Hang on. You're almost totally wrapped up. When she leaves, we'll transport your body out." I tried to speak but found that could barely get a sound out. I suddenly felt vibrations below me, as if I was on a hammock or a rope bridge or a web. Glancing at the sign before I even walked in, but it just didn't register in my mind until now. It read, "Lata's Parlor. Latrodectus, the Black Widow spider." "Okay," the voice said again softly. "We're almost ready to transport now. You might feel a tingling sensation for a moment." I screamed and screamed and screamed, the muffled screams of a condemned man about to be taken to his doom. Then I did feel a slight tingling sensation across my chest. Could I be saved? Epilogue. Morning shined down on the town as the businesses opened up for the day. The barista of Lata's Parlor was sitting at an outside tables, reading a newspaper and sipping a cup of tea. She sighed. Just the right blend of despair and hope. The sign outside read, "Come into Lata's Parlor. I have just what you need." My sister has always had a soft heart, soft as sweetbread. She cried after the old woman, despite everything. Maybe because of everything. I remember holding her as she wept, both of us covered in soot, her fingers scalded from holding shut the oven door. After the tears, she was quiet. She trailed me through the awful house with its sweetbread walls and sugared windows. I found the clothes we'd arrived in, offered up her kirtle, and she donned it without a word. She showed no whisper of response when we found the treasure in the attic, only nodded vaguely when I asked her to help me fill up the few bags we could easily carry back through the woods. Maybe it would be enough. Enough to keep us safe from our stepmother's whims. I do not want to go back there. It was the first she'd spoken in hours. I hesitated outside the witch's cottage, looking back over my shoulder at her. I do not want to go back to them, I sighed. Nor do I. But where else can we go? She wrung her fingers together in front of her skirt, eyes downcast and her teeth digging into her lower lip. Eventually, though, she nodded. Fine. You are right. She looked back at the house. Wait 1 minute. There may be something left in the kitchen. The kitchen? I repeated in horror, but she only nodded. Yes. She did not think I paid attention, but I did. I know which of her potions might be useful. If nothing else, we can sell them when we get back. I nodded slowly and followed her back into the cottage, though I stopped in the open arch that led into the kitchen itself. She moved easily, though the space, reminding me painfully of just how long she had been under the witch's thumb while the horrid crone tried to fatten me like a prize hog. She collected some dozen bottles and vials, tucking them carefully in between the bolts of silks and satins we had pilfered from the attic before returning to me. Let us go. Though there was no trail this time, she seemed to know her way through the trees. I asked how once, when we paused to wait out the dark. But all she said was that she simply knew now, as though the forest spoke to her in a way it hadn't before. I felt the first thrill of fear at that, but I knew that she was still so scared herself, I refused to let her see it. I tried to coax her into dreaming about what sort of life we might have with the witch's pilfered treasure, and managed to earn a wan smile for my efforts. But it was cold and dark, and soon enough we simply huddled together under a gnarled tree as we waited for the deepest part of night to pass. When grayish dawnlight began to filter through the leaves, she was the first to stand. She had gone quiet again, and only answered me with faint hums or single words as we continued on our way. She seemed more comfortable to be leading us now, but something in the set of her shoulders reminded me of something. Something I could not quite name. Eventually I lapsed into her silence. When the trees broke apart to reveal the familiar shape of our father's home, she froze. Then she broke into a run, and I was only half a step behind her. The door was already opening when we reached the stoop, and our father met us with his arms open and tears in his eyes. He held us close and apologized over and over, praising the Lord's name. I embraced him in turn, but alongside the relief in my chest, there was an anger in my gut. It had started a spark, but over the length of our trek back through the woods had grown into a steady flame. I met my sister's eyes over our father's shoulder, and a chill ran through me. If my anger was a flame, then hers was the dead cold of darkest winter. Our father explained that our stepmother had been stricken ill not long after we left. She was in her room now, asleep, and had been for days. He did not expect her to recover, though he had been following the physician's orders as best he could. Perhaps she shall rally to see you, he offered us hopefully. When neither of us answered, he sighed and dragged a hand down his thick beard. There was more gray in it than I remembered. I know you must be angry with me, with us, he told us wretchedly. That I could lose track of you so easily. It is an unforgivable failing in a father. Lost? I started slightly at the sharp edge in my sister's voice. Our father did too. She had always had a soft voice to match her heart. We were lost, she repeated, staring at him intently. Our father stared back, eyes wide with a hint of fear. Lost, he confirmed at last, in little more than a whisper. I dropped my eyes, unable to continue looking at him. My sister did not. Abruptly, she stood from our small table. "We will go see her then." I blinked, startled both by the sudden movement and the conviction in her voice, but I followed her into her stepmother's sick room. That flame of rage flickered a little higher in my chest, and I found that I could not make myself move more than 2 steps inside the door. My sister knelt beside the hateful woman and smoothed a hand over her brow in a gesture so tender it made me want to break something. "Here." She tipped one of the witch's vials against her lips. "This will help." I almost reached out to stop her, but as though she sensed the movement, she held a staying hand back toward me. When the vial was empty, she stood and brushed her hands down the front of her skirt. She did not look at me as she left the room. I hesitated a moment longer behind her, staring at the woman who had left us to the wood and the wild. Already her breathing seemed easier. Anger and love for my sister warred, twin flames in the center of my chest. She had always borne such a soft heart. Our stepmother was awake and lively within a day. Though shocked by our return, she was mollified enough by the offerings of treasure we had stolen away with that she simpered and even summoned up some mawkish tears through which to tell us she was so sorry we had been lost to the wood. My rage burned hotter, and my sister grew colder. "We should celebrate your return," our stepmother exclaimed, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, but no other sign of her illness remaining. "What do you wish for supper, my darlings?" "Sweetbread?" I jerked around to stare at my sister, eyes wide and mouth agape. She did not so much as glance at me, but I felt her hand take mine under the table. She smiled at her stepmother, and my throat went dry. "But you are still recovering, stepmother. I feel quite well, all things considered." "I shall make it," she offered gently. I could have stopped her then, could have clutched her hand in mine and dragged us out. We could have taken the treasure and left. It had been foolish of me to think there was nowhere for us to go. We might go anywhere. Seeing our father again, hearing him refuse to admit what they had done, made me sure of that. But my sister looked at me, just for a moment, and the ice in her gaze froze me to my chair. She was not looking for permission, but I nodded shakily anyway. Our stepmother exclaimed what a good, kind girl she was as she moved into the kitchen. Soon enough, the cloying smell of the baking sweetbread hung thick in the air. It was all I could do not to gag. My sister served the plates while the bread was still steaming gently, even drizzling the last of our honey stores over our parents' portions. "We can always get more at the market now," she said with a hollow little laugh. Our stepmother agreed happily, though our father hesitated a moment before doing so himself. He was watching my sister with a faint wariness as she took her seat beside me. "Go on, then let us eat." They did. We sat in silence. It took our stepmother first. A faint cough, a furrow in her brow. She looked up with confusion, which changed quickly to a horrified realization as she stared at my sister. "You..." Our father choked, red spattering his lips. I looked away, squeezing my sister's hand tight where she had once more taken it beneath the table. We were desperate," he strangled out, reaching for her pleadingly. "I did not want to. She made me." My sister shook her head. "You let her." He collapsed forward onto the table, his breath a wheezing rattle that grew fainter with each passing moment. Our stepmother tried to lunge for us, but her legs gave out and she sprawled across the floor. A scarlet trail, like candied jam, trickled from the corner of her mouth. I buried my face in my sister's shoulder. I still unpacked by the front door and stepped out into the cool evening. We both silent as lost reason. I buried my best, the lost breaths had faded into silence. Then she simply stood, her hand still in mine. We were both silent as we gathered up our bags, still unpacked by the front door, and stepped out into the cool evening. "You are afraid," I swallowed. "Yes." She smiled at me, squeezed my hand again, and all I felt was cold. You do not need to be. I will protect you. My sister has always had a soft heart, soft as poisoned sweetbread.